Hi there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cloud-Based Mayhem. My guest today is Nikolay Lipko. He is a Ukrainian, Russian-born pilot who's currently living in Chamonix and also a mountain guide. And he reached out to me a few months ago with the subject line, "The Scariest Flight of My Life." And I thought, interesting. I'll have to look into this. I've been doing some of this fear injury work with Jessica Love, who's working on a thesis on this. And so I read the email and found it quite interesting and got him on the show. And we recorded this the first time, about a month ago now, and the recording didn't work. There was something wrong with my platform where I record all these podcasts. And so we thought we had it, and we didn't. So I had to reach out again, and we did it again. And because we've done it twice, I've had quite a bit of time to think about this. I don't want to give it all away, but Nico's scary flight in Chamonix was on quite a boisterous day. He has been flying 5 years. He was flying at high-end ENB and had a massive frontal and really hard inflation. And on the reinflation, the A1s at the Mayons popped, the one line, which leads to 4 lines. And so it left his aircraft in a very unstable situation, which resulted in a toss. And so you'll hear all about that. But I'd like the takeaway here, and I think as you'll hear in the show, I try to remain pretty neutral. Nico is of the opinion that it's a fault with the wing and a fault to the manufacturer. And I read the manufacturer's response to this, which I thought was pretty reasonable. And these wings are load tested, and that's where a wing is qualified. And we often put stress, not often, but there are times on really big days where we could put stress on it beyond the load testing. And normally that works out. Sometimes it doesn't. And in the show, again, I point out a couple cases that I know personally where it didn't. And I have to say, I don't fully agree with Nico's takeaway here that this was a fault of the manufacturer. I don't think it was. I think if there was, if this was a problem, we would see this kind of thing over and over again, and it would be a recall. So anyway, I just wanted to put out there that I think the takeaway here should be that, we need to check our gear, that gear failures can and thankfully not likely happen, but they can happen, and it might happen. And we need to be thinking about what's our plan B and C and D when things go wrong. So it's a great story. It all worked out well. And, from both of our perspective, it's always just speculation. We can't prove one way or the other, as the manufacturer can't as well. They took the wing back. They load tested the other side. It passed. And I don't think this is necessarily leads to a manufacturing fault. I did reach out to 777 to get their reply to this. You'll hear, I read their response in this, and I haven't heard anything by the time we put the show out. So I haven't gotten a response. If I do, then I'll put that out in a future show. But you be the judge. It's a fun story, and there's a lot of takeaways here. Enjoy. Cheers. Nico, take 2, buddy, and we're going to try this again. Welcome to the Cloud-Based Mayhem. The first recording, unfortunately, didn't work out, so we'll have plenty of practice this time around. But welcome to the show, and you sent me an email quite a while back that said it was the scariest flight of my life. And I thought, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. I've been working with Jessica Love. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she's been a paraglider a long time and spent a bunch of time in beer. And she's done a lot of work for her thesis on fear injuries. And it doesn't sound like you really had a fear injury from this one, but let's give the audience a little bit of background on who you are. And we'll stay out of the politics like you mentioned last time, but you've got an interesting background, and now you're living in Chamonix and you're crazy about flying.
Hi Gavin. Thanks for having me again. So yeah, I learned a lot from this podcast, and I hope the listeners will learn something from this one as well. Yeah, I moved to France 6 years ago, and this is about the time when I started flying. So I started flying like 1 year after I moved here, and it's kind of started to become more and more uh, my like, well, not the primary sport, but one of the things I'm like super passionate about. At the beginning, it was just like yeah, simple like flying. I didn't even consider at some point I would progress to anything like serious pilot wise. But like every year I flew more and more. Last year it was 250 hours. I also
That's a
started.
healthy year.
Yeah, it was a nice one, and also was like a nice season in the Alps. So I flew some big 200K triangles. I also do climb and fly because I'm a mountain guide. It's actually also like a career change because before moving to France, I worked in software and hardware engineering for many years. And at some point, I was just fed up with living in a big city with all the stress and traffic and everything. So I moved to a tiny village in France to yeah, to follow my passion for the mountains. And paragliding became one of the things that really complements everything nicely.
Was the initial attraction just getting down because you're a mountain guide and spending a lot of time at altitude? I mean, that's kind of why the sport was invented back in the day. It was to basically get down. Was that it? I mean, when I first saw paragliding, I had no idea you could fly anywhere. I thought you just launched and you flew down. I didn't understand that there you could fly cross country. Was that kind of the same for you?
Yeah, it's a good question because like at the very beginning, I had like no clue about flying. Even more than that, I was super terrified of flying in general. So before I tried
Really?
paragliding for the first time, I think, yeah, it was 2012. I was so much afraid of like just taking a plane flight. I would stay like glued to my
Wow.
seat for the whole time. And like when I went to Chile and Argentina, like I spent 13 hours just like staring at the window and yeah, no sleep on this transatlantic flight. And then in 2012, it was actually August 19, 2012. I remember the day because it's one of those like very rare days when it was possible to top land on the summit of Mont Blanc. So
Mm.
I booked a tandem flight in Chamonix, and we just like flew around for half an hour, and it felt completely awesome. Like I wasn't scared. Like after 1 minute into the flight, I had like zero fear, and it just felt so nice and supportive. Like with the wind and everything, it felt absolutely awesome. And after we landed, the tandem pilot, he asked me like, "Do you want to go to the summit of Mont Blanc?" I thought he was joking, like because like how it's possible? How I mean, like how can you start at 2,000 meters and then like fly to 4,800 meters? It felt like a joke, but he was seriously. He was totally serious. So he was like, "You can pay me 600 euros and we go there." I was like, "No way." And I refused because I didn't have like enough cash with me and I wasn't warmed up for the occasion. But yeah, it felt like really awesome. Like, how could it be that with like this piece of like lightweight fabric, you can actually like travel distances? So initially, when I started, I thought like, well, it's just like so cool, like to be just flying around, like flying, just this, just the feeling of flying. This is what was
Mm.
something attractive. And also, when I started, so it took me 6 years to actually book a course in Chamonix to learn how to fly on my own. So it was
Wow.
2018, 5 years ago, when I actually did the course. And initially, I wasn't one of the best students in the group, and like the I could feel like the instructor's attitude. Like I wasn't one of the top guys because some people were just natural. They would just go and try the reverse launch, and it would be like all like they were doing this for for forever. And for me, it was really hard to learn. So it was completely like something I didn't feel natural because, for example, I've been skiing for 30 years, and paragliding was something that I learned from scratch, and I was already like an adult, so it just
Harder to learn when you're older.
yeah, it's such a difference because I have a daughter and she started skiing when she was less than 2 years old, and like children, they just pick up everything so
Yeah,
quickly.
natural.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
totally.
for me it was really hard, but like after 1 year, it was even less than a year of flying. One day I took off from Chamonix, and then I flew like 40 kilometers and came back. And I didn't even plan that, because I didn't have like any instrument apart from a tiny acoustic vario. So I only flew like the terrain that I knew back then. So no like GPS, nothing. And then I came back. I was freezing cold, and I was literally shivering because like after 2 hours, it was end of March, so at 3,000 like 200 meters, and I only had like lightweight soft shell and very thin jacket, so yeah, I was freezing. And also like without pod harness, it was just like open harness. I was flying, but it felt so awesome because there were like glider planes flying below me, and I was like, wow, this is, I mean, like, yeah,
On the moon.
yeah, it's crazy. And then I got hooked, into XC flying. And then one day I saw, it was February, I think, and I saw tracks which were going to 4,000-meter peak, which is not far from the lift, and I thought I could do it just like in a day. And I took my glider, which back then, like with all the kit, was maybe 15 kilos, and I just climbed this one, and I flew down. And so this is how I got another passion, is like climbing stuff and then flying off. And since then I did 24 4,000-meter like takeoffs in the Alps, and there are there are more to go. So we have 82 4,000-meter peaks here. So I have a bunch of things to do. And since last year, I started doing tandems. So I did a tandem course, and I just received my tandem qualification last month. So it's another way to share, like some wonderful moments in the air.
And is your main source of income now the guiding, with the climbing guiding, or is it still software engineering?
It's kind of in between because like with my certification, I have to validate it in France, and it's it's time consuming because France is a great country. I mean, it would have been just like a paradise if it wasn't so bureaucratized. Like there is a lot of paperwork, and everything is super slow. So even though I received my like guide license last year, to validate it in France, it takes time. So it's still like in this transition period. So in order to be able to work in France, I still need to get the French equivalent. And so my license is valid everywhere but France. Because this is how it works. So like in Italy it's valid, in Switzerland it's valid, like everywhere else it's valid. I mean, like it's international license. So but here I need to to get a special paper.
And before we get to your incident, just a couple things I wanted to hit on. The first is you've done either quite a bit or some SIV with Fabian and Malin, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So far I did 5 SIV courses. Yep.
5. Wow, that's great. So you're kind of doing one a year.
One a year on average, yeah. And this is what I plan to do.
Great.
Yeah,
good for you. And you said we skipped over some, but you said you were in a big city and you were kind of tired of it. You wanted to get out. Where was that? Was that in Russia?
That was
Moscow.
That was in Moscow. That was in Moscow. So because
Moscow.
like this is the take 2, and the listeners don't have the idea about my background. So I'm like half Russian, half Ukrainian. So I have Ukrainian dad and Russian mom, and this is like another living proof why this war is like it's just nonsense and it
Crazy.
should be stopped. Yeah.
Yeah. Where are your parents now?
My dad is in France, and my mom, unfortunately, is still in Russia.
And we didn't touch on this last time at
Yeah.
all, but what's happening with her? Where is she, and is she what's her take on that? Give us the 60-second. What's her take on this?
You mean like on the on politics
What?
or?
How does she feel about what's going on? Yeah, not so much even politics, but just I'd love to. I think people, we only get what we see in the
Yeah.
media, and we only get, depending on what echo chamber you're in, is the media we get. I'd just be curious, from a local, from someone who lives there and is in Moscow, what does your mom think about all of this?
Mm, I can tell you that so far I know only two people who actually would support like this whole crazy stuff happening, and none of my friends,
Really?
like
Wow.
no one really supports that. And especially like of course it comes to specific demographics and like education and yeah, general like
Sure.
exposure, like to the news, I would say, and like general background. But yeah, I would say that on average people don't support that. I mean, it's just, yeah, it shouldn't be happening, like in 21st century we should have
Yeah.
wars like this. it's
It's
it's not
crazy.
normal. For example, on my mountain guide course, I did it in Kyrgyzstan, and most of the like aspirants, they were coming from, like, they were from Russia, they were from Ukraine, uh, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and like never ever we had any issues on like the nationalistic, like
Yeah.
ground, I would say. I mean, yeah, I have so many friends and relatives on both sides, and of course, like no one wants this. Yeah, it's obvious because like
Yeah.
my friends from Ukraine, those with whom I did guide training, now instead of like working in the mountains, they are like at war, and this is plain wrong.
Madness. It is madness. Crazy.
Yeah,
Well, I feel for your mom and your friends, and it must be a very tricky situation for you. And as so many are, both citizenships. It's there should be one happy family up there. It's crazy.
yeah, that
And
would be great.
we see it. So that would be great. Yeah, I mean, well, maybe someday. Well, let's talk about your incident. Pretty it was scary. From
Yeah.
we've already talked about this, we'll do it again, but pretty scary incident with a pretty happy outcome, I would say. But take us through what happened that day.
Okay, so it was last year, almost exactly a year ago. That year, I changed my harness and I changed my glider. So I had a brand new glider, 777 Rook 3, but we can talk later about it. And I think that was the flight number 13. So I took off from Chamonix on a fairly strong day, but nothing crazy. I mean, like the thermals were maybe 5 meters per second. So it was strong, but not really like outrageously strong. And then, like 1 hour into the flight, I had a collapse. So I was like below two cumulus clouds, and I decided to move from one to another. There was obviously like some turbulence in between, like some sink, and I had a collapse, which I reopened, and so like, well, I mean, like pump the brakes, like, and on reopening, like there was a very severe shock, and like it felt immediately that something went wrong. So like looking up, I could see, because like first I looked up, I could see like the collapse opening, and so I thought, okay, fine, like no problem, like flying further. But then like the glider didn't didn't feel right, So I look up again, and I could see like there is a line in the air, which is not attached to anything. And turned out that on this reinflation, the A1 line snapped at Meillon. So it means that I lost 4 attachment points in the middle of the glider, because the way the glider is designed, so like the A1 line goes from Meillon, then it splits in two, and then it splits in two another time. So I lost 4
Sure.
attachment points, and at this point, like the glider became irrecoverable. So it was going between stalling and parachutal. So like hands up, and it would go like parachutal, just like falling down. And if I touch a little bit of brake, it would stall immediately. So my descent was maybe around 10 meters per second, according to the GPS track log.
And
And
any rotation,
well, it was
any spinning?
it was unstable, obviously, because like it was like in the middle, but still like to it was the left side. So
Hmm.
yeah, there was some spinning, but I
But
tried to.
nothing violent. It was more just coming down really fast.
It was
It
coming
wasn't that you were
down.
in.
Obviously, it was hard to maintain the course. Like I
Yep.
tried to maintain the course as much as possible, but the problem, as I said, like the moment I touched the brakes, it would just like stall and like would go into backfly. And so yeah, it was not really like super stable, because like even in backfly, like normally the gliders, they are not like super stable. You can uh try to adjust your course
Steer.
in like using the weight shift, but still, yeah, it was kind of like a bit shaky. And I was at 800 meters above the ground, so I decided not to deploy my reserve immediately, because thanks to Fabian, I I remember this story that Fabian told us during the first SIV I did with Flyo, about the guy who deployed his reserve at 2,000 meters in Annecy, and then with the valley wind and the strong thermals, he started his XC flight under his reserve. So he actually crossed couple valleys, from what I remember, and with the rescue services following him on the ground, watching him in the air. And it must have been like very scary experience, because like when you are under reserve and you have like zero control on like what's happening, it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's seriously scary. So I remember this story, and I decided that I would wait, because also like in this area above Passy, there are many cliff faces. So if you actually get dragged into one of these faces under your reserve, yeah, it's gonna be ugly. And in about 1 minute, I lost maybe 500 meters or so, and then I decided it was time to throw. So I deployed the reserve, killed the glider as much as possible, and yeah, basically this was time to prepare for impact, because even though I had steerable reserve, like steerable square, so it doesn't give you like much steerability, I would say, with only 1.5 to 1 glide ratio. And then I hit the ground really hard, because initially when I just deployed, it was super thermic, and I was actually going like up or staying at the same altitude, just with the
Mm.
strength of thermals. So it's possible to see on my track log, I was in zeros for some time, and then I started to go down like pretty quick, like 5 to 6 meters per second. And I was with a fairly good margin on my reserve, like 100 kilos out of 125. So like,
So so the reserve was rated for 125,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
your all up weight was 100. That should have
exactly,
been
yes,
fine.
yeah. So like 20 to
Okay.
25% margin is like what's recommended by most SIV instructors.
Sure. Yeah.
And unfortunately, I couldn't really land on my feet and do PLF, because I was still in some rotation when I was going down, and I think this was coming from like thermic activity, like because it was really thermic in this area, and then later when I was on the ground, I could hear like the thermals coming in, and like the wind noise was really really strong. So I guess it was just like
Mm.
swirling effect of the thermal that was putting me in some sort of like rotation. And
Lee
because
side of the thermal or something, or
I don't really think that it was like a lee side, because like the thermals,
no,
they
not
actually,
no, not lee side, but lee side of the thermal potentially. It
yeah,
sounded like you were in pretty sinky air
yeah.
around very thermic conditions. Yeah.
That's exactly the case. And so I hit the ground like pretty hard, and unfortunately it was with my back, even though I managed to exit the pod, and I was in vertical position with the reserve attached to my shoulders. So like everything was was okay in terms of preparation for the impact, but it was just a bit not enough luck in terms of the area where I landed. It was fairly steep slope, and also because I was in rotation, I couldn't control how I land, and that's how I landed on my back. Probably like the worst possible scenario.
Mm.
And I was really scared for my limbs. Like yeah, like the first idea. Oh no, I don't want to be paralyzed, because yeah, obviously like movement is absolutely essential part of everyone's life. But yeah, for mountain guide, it's even more essential. So
Mm.
I was really scared, but luckily I could move my legs. I could move my hands, so that was okay. But of course, there was like severe shock with like 5 to 6 meter per second descent rate. And another thing, as I was going down under my reserve, why I actually say that it was like the scariest flight, for two reasons. Because first of all, I had ACL surgery just 5 months before that. So like with 5 months post op, you are still not really solid, like to take any sort of significant
Hmm.
impact, because you can re-injure the knee. And the second thing is because just 2 or 3 weeks before the accident, I repacked my reserve myself. And so I thought, okay, so if it doesn't work now, then I'm dead, because there is no other option, because like the glider is not flyable anymore. And I only had one reserve, even though I had a harness with two reserve compartments. Was like a brand new harness.
Mm.
I had only 7 flights on it, but I didn't install the second reserve just yet, because I thought, well, okay, it's like still beginning of the season, like it's nothing crazy. But it's kind of hard to imagine that at some point your glider will just break in the air, especially a brand new one. So
Mm.
after I yeah, so after I impacted the ground, I thought that I'm fine, and I actually called the rescue services straight away, because they might have received like calls from like some people telling that there was a reserve deployment. So I called the rescue services. I told them that I was fine, and there is no need to rescue me. And then I called my friend, because as I said, I was 5 months post-op, so I wasn't supposed to carry 20-kilo backpack downhill. So I called my
Yeah.
friend to come and help me bring the pack down. And then I started to pack everything. And by the time I finished packing, I had very, very strong pain in my lower back and in my abdominals. And it was getting worse and
Mm.
worse. And so I was like, oh no, I hope, like it's not like some sort of internal injury. So I called the rescue services again, and I asked them what would they suggest. And so they put me on the line with the doctor, and the doctor started to ask like multiple questions, like where the pain is, like localizing it, like giving like the grade 1 to 10 and all that stuff. And then they told me like there is a risk of internal bleeding, like according to my answers. And so they would rather come and pick me up and bring me to the hospital.
Mm.
So then the helicopter came again, like heads off to French rescue.
Yeah.
I think these guys, they're just amazing, like because they landed the helicopter in a tiny opening. I mean, like it didn't land completely because it was steepish slope, but like the rotor blades, they were like 1.5 or 2 meters away from the trees, and it was such a thermic days, and like because and it was windy, and it's crazy. Like their skill is absolutely amazing. So thanks a lot to these guys. They brought me to the hospital, and there I did like a bunch of checks, spent there a few hours in an emergency room, and yeah, miraculously nothing was broken, just like severe shock. And I had a lot of neck pain and lower back pain for the next few weeks.
Mm.
But
Oh, wow.
yeah, I had to rehab it for a bit, but nothing broken.
Must have had some pretty serious internal bruising and stuff. That stuff takes a long time
Yeah,
to get
yeah, yeah,
over.
yeah. That's true.
Yeah, several things that strike me as is quite fortunate is just having this accident in Passy and not in a million other places in the world where
True.
you wouldn't have had the helicopter option. And I mean, it is quite a cliffy area there. I can see how you were hesitant to throw. So you've had a year to think about this and a year to kind of unpack it all. Before we get into your thoughts on the glider itself, anything you've changed since this incident in terms of gear, preparation, training, anything? I don't know. Is there anything you wish you would have known uh, a year ago that you know now that would have potentially changed the outcome? Although the outcome in many ways was very good, but
Yeah.
is there anything you would have done differently,
So yeah, I thought
or
about
anything
it.
you do differently now?
Yeah. There are like some things that I changed, and some things that I would say I would keep doing the way I did before, because I think this is what saved my bacon that day. Um, so what I would change from now on, and like something that I started doing like a year ago, from now on I would only fly the equipment of the top brands. I mean, like everyone decides what the top brand in paragliding is, but I just think that like some companies, they devote more attention to quality control than the others, because even like the smaller companies, then they sometimes make outstanding products which are really good and which in certain categories can outperform the others. But I think the quality control is just not the same, and like overall, like amount of resources and time spent for R&D, yeah, it's something that finally might affect the overall quality and safety of the product. um, what I would also do, I would say that I would try to minimize flying without reserve. I mean, in some countries, like flying without reserve is illegal. But here in France, like you can see this fairly often, especially for those guys who do hike and fly or climb and fly. Like flying in string harness without reserve, without a helmet. I definitely can't endorse this sort of flying. But at the same time,
Mm,
for climb and
mm.
fly projects, especially for like high altitudes, like bringing a reserve is really cumbersome, and it takes not just like the weight, because like modern reserve normally weighs like around 1 kilo if it's like a lightweight one, but it's just like the volume, and then with the volume you get like a bigger pack, it's more difficult to move around. So for climb and fly, I still do some projects without reserve, but for hike and fly I would never even consider like doing that without reserve, because for climb and fly in general, you just go somewhere in more or less calm conditions. So you don't do it like in crazy aerology, for example, with stronger winds or with like potential fern effect, or like in the lee side, or you don't pull crazy maneuvers without reserve. But for general like hike and fly, I don't see a point why would someone save 1 kilo of weight.
Yeah, I don't think I agree with you 100%. I don't think this is where we try to save weight. I mean, it's been an interesting kind of mental exercise for me, even with the X Alps, with the 4 campaigns there. My reserve is, I don't have the 20% that you're talking about.
Hmm.
I am taking on automatically a lot more risk just by flying a reserve that's incredibly light. And, I think my reserve is 980 grams. And so, I'm going to be coming down, and this is in good air. I'm going to be coming down at least 5 meters per second, if not six. And that's definitely where you can start snapping stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I think maybe that's justified in, in something where you're participating in a race like that, where, you're talking metric tons over the course of the race that you're carrying, and every little gram counts. But you've certainly got to be willing to accept the trade-offs. And that's a whole nother discussion with lightweight gear. There are definitely a lot of compromises we're accepting there, and I think we need to frame it that way, that you're accepting more risk, that when you're flying lightweight gear, it's automatic, it's physics.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
okay, good stuff. I mean, why I really kind of liked your email, and the reason I've wanted to talk about this is it just, we don't hear about gear failures in our sport. It's usually, our heads that make the mistake, flying conditions that are beyond our ability, flying on bad days, just not, like Senator Croce says, you fly the good days. And so we're automatically, by flying better equipment, the reason the accidents have not gone down, like Russ Ogden says, is because it allows us to fly in harsher and harsher conditions. We can fly in more wind, and wind is dangerous. You have lee and all this stuff. But in this case, it was a gear failure, which is really interesting. I want to read 777's response. We received the glider with broken A1 line. The pilot stated that the line broke after heavy frontal collapse flying in strong conditions. You've just confirmed that. We examined the line and found the line has the right stitching according to our production files. The tread material is as per production files. We used the line on the other side and performed a line break test. The line broke exactly at the same value as the line sample certified Eric Turquoise, the test center in Switzerland. This complies with the theory that the materials and labor work have been done as it has been done on the certified line and load and shock test wing. Possible conclusions. The way the line broke shows that it has been a subject to a massive load, higher than the one that is performed for the certification of the lines and wings for load and shock tests. This kind of abnormal thing can happen where the load distribution ends up on one rather than two single points in a moment in time. There is always a possibility of micro damage prior to the event, but this would be speculation at this point. So that'd be sand or salt water or something like that. Since the glider and its manufacturing is up to the point of the serial wing, 777 is not taking any further actions from here. How does that response sit with you?
Well, obviously, I wasn't happy, especially because I paid for brand new glider, and the second reason is because that was my second 777 glider. I flew the night before that for like 100 something hours, and I did my first bigger cross country flights with the night. I flew my first 100K on the night. And with Rook, yeah, I was really disappointed to see that because, obviously, after an accident like that, I would never ever have the trust to fly under this wing again. Even if it's like
Mm.
up to specification or whatever, I just believe that there is some design issue with this particular model. And the reason I believe that is because I saw a guy on paragliding forum who did SIV. I think it was in Annecy, and during practicing the frontal collapse, he had also A1 line snapping on his Rook 3. And in his case, it didn't break at the maillon; it broke at the glider attachment. But anyway, you see, like there are two gliders of the same model, and they have some issue on frontal collapse. So to me, this is something to think about and to start thinking that this is not coincidence. So I think
Mm.
in the case of, and in this case, 777 should have done more inspection and more tests maybe. I mean, just like flying, like maybe not this particular wing, because I actually think that like this particular wing is just exactly as all other rooks out there, but some sort of design like decision, maybe like the combination of like the way how they split the lines and how the weight is distributed, combined with the fact that rook has extremely small openings on the leading edge, and this leads to the shock reinflation at some point. I don't know, because I think I had like a smaller collapse on the rook before that, like maybe a week or two before that, and also it felt like the reopening was a little bit harsh, even though the collapse wasn't like a big one, and so
Mm.
I don't know. It just feels that something is wrong with like particular design decision on this glider. I don't want to say like 777 make bad gliders, because I actually think like they make a very nice gliders. And I was very happy owner of like Knight, and I know many people who flew like Queen and so on. But like this particular model, I believe has some issue, and they just don't want to acknowledge that, because if they do, they would have to recall all the gliders of this model on the market, and this might be like, yeah, really financially taxing on the company.
So I want to be clear here for the listener that this is obviously all conjecture. We don't have, you or I don't have proof. We don't have backup. We don't have, I literally know nothing about 777. So I can't even weigh in here. But I'm curious if you have, did you talk about your incident with Malin or Fabian? Did they have, what was their opinion?
Yeah, of course, I talked with them, because actually after this accident, I had SIV in 3 weeks after the accident. So
Mm.
I bought another glider and did SIV just after that, which was really like confidence inspiring, like, and which was a great way to come back to flying. And both Fabian and Malin, they told me that they have never ever encountered anything like that during the SIF courses that they run.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fabian had a similar um, accident on a prototype glider that he was flying for one of the companies, but it's completely different. Like flying a prototype, which, yeah, this can happen. I mean, probably many people saw this footage on Instagram or YouTube where the glider rips like apart in two pieces, one of the prototypes. But
Mhm.
when you have a serial wing and it breaks in flight, I have never met any SIV instructor who witnessed something like that, because I talked, I think, with 4 or 5 SIV instructors, and also with other like training instructors in Chamonix and around Annecy. No one ever heard of anything like that. So this is something, well, I would say at least suspicious, and also because we have this second case with the guy who had problem with the glider also during the frontal collapse. These these things, they tell me that it's not a coincidence.
Uh, so I can say that I have heard of this happening in two other scenarios. One is obviously the very famous case of Kiwi, our friend that had his terrible misfortune and accident in Nevada. Now, Ozone did a study on that. He was on the Xeno, and they got the glider back. It had been sitting in the desert for a few weeks. It was an older glider, and he had relined it, and the conclusion was that the knot you do at the fabric end, at the wing end, is it's very important how that girth hitch is, and if you don't get that right, it can compromise. I believe they said in the study maybe 20%. I've got Russ on the show next week. I can confirm that, but
Hmm.
when collectively you have, typically this wouldn't be a big deal, but collectively, he was flying in extraordinarily strong air, and, big guy, big wing. And, probably the theory is, we don't know for sure, but the theory is he took a huge hit and probably popped a line or maybe 2 lines and then zippered out. And then that just put more and more and more pressure on the succeeding lines and literally came, you know, unattached from the wing. Another case is a good friend of mine and neighbor, Nate Scales, was flying here. I think it's the only time he's thrown his reserve. I don't remember what year this was. It was about 10 years ago on the Ice Peak 6,
Mhm.
Niviak, which is a bomber wing. I mean, everybody can attest to that. And, I don't know how many hours he had on it. I don't know anything about the where the wing was at, but it was in incredibly strong conditions, 12 to 14 meter day.
Wow.
So
Okay.
exceedingly strong. Which is, not typical even for here, but it does get that strong here. It's a very, very strong place to fly, kind of like the Owens out in California. And, he took a monster hit and blew a whole bunch of his A lines in the reinflation. So, I think there are circumstances where, and I'm not saying this one way or the other with your wing. I think there are circumstances where we just put forces well beyond what a manufacturer can even build for. And then it's a crapshoot if you if it's gonna hold together or not. And so, I think Air Turquoise obviously does their job and they do it very well. And, load tests are Ian certified, and we have all these things to test a glider. But I would postulate that in this case, you may have taken a hit that is beyond, load testing certifications. Whether that's acceptable or not, I don't know. I don't know enough about these things. What I do need to do is reach out to 777 and just get their, further thoughts on this. I agree with you. The email seems a little. I would have liked to know a little bit more than that. Yeah. Anyway, I can't conjecture either way. I think really the lesson here is, like you said, flying gear that you're really comfortable with. I think the other thing that's, something that I rarely do is really check my wing, and this has helped affirm for me that that's a necessary part of our procedures. You and I spoke last time. I've had two instances about gear I would call massive failures that have been in my career, that or my flying time, that have been uh, both were really scary. One was a harness. I got a brand new harness. I won't name the manufacturer, and the shoulder straps of many harnesses are, the strap itself, where the buckles go through, is covered by uh, uh, kind of a webbing, stretchy material that, so dirt can't get in there, and the tabs come out of that where you can either loosen or tighten. Everybody listening knows what I'm talking about. But I just happened, out of pure sheer luck, to grab the harness to go fly it the very first time, and kind of yanked on the shoulder strap to pick it up off the ground. It was a seat harness, acro harness, and so it's, they're quite heavy at two reserves and everything. And I grabbed it and yanked it off the ground, and the shoulder buckles weren't buckled. So they
Oh
were
boy.
they were just tucked up into this webbing material, this stretchy webbing material. It was brand new. It was delivered to me in the box like this. And that's not something we would ever check. You would obviously, sit in your simulator and adjust things, but an acro harness, a seat harness, they're comfortable. I can adjust them in the air. I didn't need to do that. I just
Yeah.
grab the harness and go fly it, but it wasn't, if I had flown that harness, I could have just, picked up, tipped upside down and fallen straight out of the thing. Because they had just skipped that. They hadn't done the buckle, they hadn't done the shoulder straps together. So crazy. Another one was, one time I went to throw my reserve and ripped the handle right off the bag. And it was a bag again that was manufactured by X company, but it had looked, on inspection afterwards, because, after I threw the handle off, it's pretty hard to get a reserve out from under your butt that doesn't have a handle on it. And it takes quite a bit of time. So it was scary, and it took quite a bit of time. And so, we inspected it afterwards, and the handle part that was sewn to the bag was literally, it had kind of three little stitches with the kind of material that you would make a child's project out of. I mean, it was just a joke. And I don't know how this got through. And the company I bought it from sent it back, and the answer was, we don't know how this happened. This is absurd. I mean,
Nice.
it wasn't, it was, so it was a whole reserve bag that, again, came with the harness that was almost a toy. And so, these are thankfully unusual, but to your point, I think that many companies are small, and the testing procedures are, I think, most of this stuff is manufactured overseas, and we just need to be mindful that mistakes, they're made by humans, and humans make mistakes, and it's a good idea to inspect your gear. I mean, the handle thing is just not something I would ever think of. You would just, oh, okay, when you pull the handle and it's gonna, but it just came off. It wasn't that I was overly aggressive, that a handle should be sewn properly onto the reserve bag.
Yeah, on the same note, like with the company of the same manufacturer, when it got delivered, I had like uh, well, a twist in one of the lines, and yeah, it was just like one of the belts was twisted, and the
Mm.
dealer who was delivering the harness, like he was really ashamed, because he was like, oh wow, how could they assemble it like this way, and so
Mm.
he had to disassemble it like in front of me, and put it back like normally. I mean, this was not like a safety issue, because it was just like aesthetically
Sure.
wrong. But on the
Mm.
same note, when I received my tandem glider, and after I did about 20 flights on it, and also after I did like a course with the French school, so two instructors watched me at the takeoff, and none of us noticed that on this tandem glider there were like B and C gallery lines. They were crossing each other, so it's really
Mm.
crazy, because like it's very very hard to see. And luckily, like during the flight phase, there were no consequences, so the glider wasn't deformed, it was flying straight. But imagine, like, if there was any
Sure.
sort of like in flight incident, it might have created friction, and this friction would have destroyed the lines, because like B's and C's, they were crossing each other at the gallery, so like towards the glider.
And especially important with tandem gear, then you got somebody
Yeah,
else's life on the line
I
as
flew
well.
my daughter on this one, like I did like maybe 15 flights with my daughter, and then I discovered that yeah, the gallery lines, they cross. Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow. Yeah, we need to check our gear. Uh, any mental issues, any kind of fear injury that came along with this? Anything you had to battle back from? Or it sounds like you got back on the horse with SIV a few weeks later, but was that any kind of an issue?
I'm actually very happy that I jumped on the horse, as you say, straight away. So actually, less than 24 hours after I was discharged from the hospital, I was at the takeoff. My wife brought me there. I still had my previous glider, which was also made by the 777, and I did a flight like for 1 hour. I mean, like not very mellow conditions. It was a spring day, but late in the evening, and the cloud base was really high. So I basically jumped into flying straight away after the accident, and I think for me this was the way to deal with the fear injury. Obviously, every time now when I overfly the crash site, and this is like particularly known area for fairly rough thermal, I always have this in the back of my mind, like, yeah, what happens if, yeah, if I ever like have a collapse like that big, and if it, I don't know. I think it's really, really unlikely that I ever experience again the gear failure like this, because I think it's like 1 in a million or
So
whatever. It's
unusual.
it's
Yeah.
extreme. It's extremely rare, and yeah, this is again. Why it feels very strange that the same model had a similar breakdown like twice. Mm, So yeah, like this SIV was excellent way to also to push myself. So I bought a new glider with the recommendation of Malin. So thanks to him, and I had very nice season after that. So like I actually think now that doing SIV on a new glider is probably the best way to discover how it
Mm.
behaves in different scenarios, how it reacts, and yeah, it makes you not just safer; it makes you also much more confident. You just trust.
Mm.
You trust your gear. You trust your instincts, and in general this is something that I plan to do in the future. I want to keep doing SIV courses once a year, and yeah, hopefully also I can do it like every time I change equipment. That's like the best way to discover it, because during my SIV courses in the past 5 years I deployed my reserve twice, so just on purpose because I wanted to. And I think this is one of the reasons, like in my accident there were no severe outcomes, because I knew exactly what to do. So first of all, I didn't
Mm.
deploy when I was very high. The second thing is that I knew how to kill the glider, and finally I knew how to deploy, because actually like deploying your reserve, like it's something that you should practice, like even if you don't go to SIV. For those listeners who like don't do this often, or like don't do this at all, even though I highly recommend it, you should just like deploy your reserve when you repack it, like just like sit in your
Yeah.
harness, like mount it and like throw it, because actually, yeah, especially like under G-force it might be not so obvious how how to do it, especially like if you have like a heavier reserve. And also like some harnesses, they have different configurations, like how far back you should reach. And those who fly with just one reserve, yeah, obviously like if you are in rotation scenario, it might be extremely difficult to throw reserve if you are in auto rotation. And in this scenario, like again, like I just quote Malin here, he says that 30 to 40% of deployments, when you throw in auto rotation, they would go in the
Into
glider,
the wing.
yeah, straight.
Yep.
So yeah, it's something that I plan to do from like since last year. I will always fly cross country, like big cross country flights. I'll always fly with two reserves, because it's just like another extra safety measure. Unfortunately, not something that you would do, like at hike and fly competitions, which I also started doing. But yeah, as you said, like it comes to measuring every gram. Of course, like if you do X Alps, it's even more crazy, because
Mm.
you are doing this for a very, very long period of time, and yeah, because you cover a lot of vertical and also flat distance. But even like when you do 1 3 days events, yeah, it's something.
Yeah, I don't think there's much of a good argument for not flying with two reserves. If you're not, then you're compromising seriously on safety. I had a very, very low incident before the last X Alps here, doing a bivy trip that I've talked about on the show several times, but it was, instantly into an auto rotation. And when the incident happened, I was 100 meters off the deck. So I was very low when it happened. And my immediate reaction was to throw the reserve. I didn't have any time to deal with this, so I didn't even think about it. I just started reaching for the reserve, but then I started winding up, and I had my SIV instructors, voice in my head, and I was flying lightweight bivy gear. I only had one reserve. I only had one shot at this, and so I solved the auto rotation first, and then then through, because I was so afraid of that thing going into the wing, and I would have been, either severely hurt or dead had I. And so I was very happy for that SIV training, but it also, it would have been that would have been a nice scenario to have two reserves, just huck and huck, and one of them was probably going to at least work out. But yeah, I think again it comes down to what's the risk profile that people are willing to accept. And this is a fascinating story that I'm really glad you shared with us, because it's just not often we hear about gear stuff. And the I'm not sure I'm fully in your court that it was because of the gear. It might have just been, like you said, a really big hit. But it's all speculation. We don't really know, and let the listener decide. And I'm just happy that it worked out for you so well, and that you had a great season. And yet again, reserves work. We got to use them. We just had a terrible incident down in the World Cup in Brazil where there wasn't one, and the ending couldn't have been worse. So thanks for sharing your story, Nico, and I appreciate it. I'm going to reach out here to 777 and hopefully get their response before this goes live. But thanks for sharing all this with me and our audience, and good luck to you, bud. Have some fun flights this year, and I hope to see you at Cloudbase.
Thank you, Gavin. Have a nice season as well, and see you at the Cloudbase. Cheers, bye.
If you find the Cloud-Based Mayhem valuable, you can support it in a lot of different ways. You can give us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher, or however you get your podcast. That goes a long ways and helps spread the word. You can blog about it on your own website or share it on social media. You can talk about it on the way up to launch with your pilot friends. I know a lot of interesting conversations have happened that way. And of course, you can support us financially. This show does take a lot of time, a lot of editing, a lot of storage and music and all kinds of behind the scenes cost. So if you can support us financially, all we've ever asked for is $1 a show. And you can do that through a one-time donation through PayPal, or you can set up a subscription service that charges you for each show that comes out. We put a new show out every 2 weeks. So for example, if you did $1 a show and every 2 weeks, it'd be about $25 a year. So way cheaper than a magazine subscription, and it makes all of this possible. I do not want to fund this show with advertising or sponsors. We get asked about that pretty frequently, but for a whole bunch of different reasons, which I've said many times on the show, I don't want to do that. I don't like having that stuff at the front of the show. And I also want you to know that these are authentic conversations with real people, and these are just our opinions, but our opinions are not being skewed by sponsors or advertising dollars. I think that's a pretty toxic business model. So I hope you dig that. You can support us. If you go to cloudbasedmayhem.com, you can find the places to support. You can do it through patreon.com/cloudbasedmayhem. If you want a recurring subscription, you can also do that directly through the website. We've tried to make it really easy, and that will give you access to all the bonus material, little video casts that we do, and extra little nuggets that we find in conversations that don't make it into the main show, but we feel like you should hear. We don't put any of that behind a paywall. If you can't afford to support us, then just let me know and I'll set you up with an account. Of course, that'll be lifetime, and hopefully you're being in a position someday to be able to support us. But you'll find all that on the website. All of you who have supported us or even joined our newsletter or bought Cloud-Based Mayhem merchandise, t-shirts or hats or anything, you should be all set up. You should have an account, and you should be able to access all that bonus material now. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support, and we'll see you on the next show. Thank you.